Beneath the punishing Colorado winter, where snowdrifts offer the only shelter from lethal sub-zero temperatures, 5 newborn military-bred Belgian Malinois puppies lay abandoned, their necks bearing strange electronic tags, their fate sealed by those who deemed them inadequate. When Marcus Reynolds, a former canine handler with haunting memories of his own, discovered them at the edge of his inherited mountain property, something beyond compassion stirred within him. These weren't simply discarded animals. They were survivors like himself, rejected by an institution that values perfection over resilience. With trembling hands that once guided elite military dogs through combat zones, he now cradled fragile lives, unaware that this act of mercy would expose a conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of Atlas Security Operations, a powerful defense contractor with blood-stained secrets. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The February cold in Summit Ridge was an unforgiving force, relentless and merciless. It penetrated clothing, crystallized breath, and drained warmth from anything it touched. The mountain air carried the scent of pine and ice, a clean but dangerous perfume that promised beauty and delivered peril to the unprepared. Marcus Reynolds knew this cold intimately. It reminded him of nights in Afghanistan's mountains, though without the constant vigilance against enemy combatants, or at least that's what he told himself. The reality was that vigilance had become his permanent state, a companion he couldn't shake even 3 years after his medical discharge. The old Ford F-150 groaned as Marcus guided it along the boundary. Of the 20 acres he'd inherited from his uncle 8 months ago, its heater labored against the 15-degree air, creating a pocket of barely adequate warmth. Marcus kept the radio silent. Too many sounds still triggered memories he worked daily to manage. Frost gathered at the edges of his beard as he surveyed the property line, checking for fallen trees or damaged fencing. Reynolds Ridge Ranch had seen better days, and Marcus wasn't entirely sure why he'd decided to keep it after the inheritance. Perhaps because he had nowhere else to go. Perhaps because his uncle's final letter had asked him to find peace in the silence of the mountains. "This place needs work," he muttered to himself, a habit formed during long patrols with only his military dog Vega for company. Talking to himself seemed more reasonable than acknowledging the emptiness Vega's death had left behind. Marcus stopped the truck beside a section of fence that had collapsed under heavy snowfall. He pulled thick gloves from his pocket and grabbed his tools from the truck bed. The repetitive labor of repairing fence posts helped quiet his mind. Another coping mechanism his therapist would probably approve of. As he worked, a sound carried through the crisp air, so faint he almost dismissed it as imagination. He paused, hammer suspended mid-swing. There it was again, a weak, tremulous cry, almost strangled in its desperation. Marcus dropped the hammer and followed the sound, his boots crunching through snow that reached mid-calf. The cries led him beyond his property line to a shallow ravine where the land dipped between rocky outcroppings. At first, he saw nothing but pristine snow and the dark shapes of winter-bare aspens. Then movement caught his eye, a slight shifting beneath a wind-blown snowdrift near a cluster of rocks. 5 tiny forms huddled together in a shallow depression, partially covered by drifting snow. Puppies with the distinctive markings of Belgian Malinois, the same breed he'd worked with in Afghanistan. They were newborns, maybe 2 weeks old at most, their eyes only recently opened. They were dangerously thin, their sides heaving with labored breaths, their whimpers growing fainter in the deadly cold. One raised its head weakly as Marcus approached, a female with unusual grey markings, and eyes that held more awareness than should be possible in a puppy so young. "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed, dropping to his knees in the snow. "What happened to you?" He scanned the area quickly, looking for signs of the mother or tracks leading to the site. Nothing except a single set of human boot prints, now partially filled with fresh snow. The puppies had been carried here and left, deliberately, abandoned in conditions that meant certain death. The smallest puppy, a male with distinctive black markings, lay almost motionless, except for the shallow rise and fall of its ribs. A fawn-colored female tried to crawl toward Marcus, but collapsed back into the snow. Another male, solid dark, brown, shivered violently while pressing against a tan female who emitted a plaintive whine. Marcus's eyes narrowed as he noticed something odd. Each puppy bore a small electronic device attached to a band around its neck, not standard microchips or identification tags. These were sophisticated monitoring devices with blinking status lights and what appeared to be biometric sensors. Each displayed a different alphanumeric code, ASO K14, ASO K17, and so on. "Someone did this to you," he said, anger rising in his chest as military training kicked in. Recognition of the tag's likely purpose flooded him with cold fury. "Someone left you here to die after monitoring your development." The grey-marked female puppy, the only one still making efforts to move, studied Marcus with that unnervingly intelligent gaze. Marcus moved slowly, remembering protocols for approaching distressed animals from his canine handler training. "Easy there," he said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." He unzipped his heavy winter coat and created a sheltered space against his chest. Carefully, he picked up the smallest, weakest puppy first, tucking it inside his coat against his body. Heat. One by one, he gathered all 5, cradling them against himself inside the makeshift shelter of his coat. The grey-marked female watched his every move, her eyes never leaving his face even as he lifted her last. Unlike the others who remained limp with cold and exhaustion, she pressed deliberately against his chest once inside his coat. His truck was a quarter-mile away through deepening snow. Marcus moved as quickly as he dared, the precious cargo against his chest guiding his every step. His combat-injured leg protested with sharp stabs of pain, but he pressed forward with the single-minded focus that had once kept him and his canine partner alive behind enemy lines. By the time he reached his truck, Marcus's body was radiating heat, from exertion, creating a warm cocoon for the puppies. He cranked the heater to maximum and carefully arranged the puppies on a blanket he kept behind the seat. "Hang on," he told them, meeting the grey female's steady gaze. "Just hang on." The drive back to the ranch house seemed eternal. Marcus checked the rearview mirror constantly to ensure the puppies were still breathing. His mind raced through options. The nearest veterinary clinic was 45 minutes away in good conditions. With the roads as they were and the puppies this fragile, they might not survive the journey. As he pulled up to the weathered log cabin that served as the ranch house, Marcus spotted an unfamiliar vehicle in the drive, a white SUV with Colorado plates. A woman in a heavy parka stood from the porch swing where she'd apparently been waiting, stamping her feet against the cold. "Mr. Reynolds?" she called out, approaching cautiously. "I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, Mountain Mobile Veterinary Services. Your neighbor Tom Garcia called me, said you might need some fence sections replaced after the storm damage." She stopped short when she saw the bundle Marcus was carefully removing from the truck. "Those are puppies," she said, closing the distance quickly. "What happened?" "Found them abandoned in the ravine off the east property line," Marcus replied, his voice rough from cold and emotion. "They've been left to die." Dr. Vasquez's professional demeanor took over as she immediately assessed the situation. "They're severely hypothermic. How long have they been out there?" "Don't know. Hours, at least, judging by the partially filled tracks." "We need to warm them gradually and get fluids into them right away," she said, already moving toward the house. "Do you have a heating pad? Towels? Any milk replacer?" Marcus shook his head as he followed her inside. "The cabin's warm. I've got towels and some milk, but nothing special for puppies." I have emergency supplies in my vehicle. I was making ranch calls when Tom contacted me. She was already examining the smallest puppy, her expression grave. These are Belgian Malinois puppies, high-value working dogs. They shouldn't be separated from their mother for at least 8 weeks. There was no mother, Marcus said, building up the fire in the stone fireplace. Just these 5 left in the snow. Dr. Vasquez frowned as she noticed the electronic devices around the puppies' necks. What are these? Some kind of monitoring devices, Marcus replied, helping her position the puppies near the fireplace's warmth. Each has a different code. ASO, Atlas Security Operations. They're a private military contractor. Special operations, security details, training programs. She looked up sharply. You recognize this? Marcus nodded grimly. I worked K9 units for 8 years in the army. Atlas recruited heavily when I was getting out. They've been developing their own specialized breeding program for military and security dogs. Dr. Vasquez carefully examined the devices without removing them. These are monitoring vital signs and probably location. Why would they abandon puppies they're tracking? The gray-marked female puppy nudged Marcus's hand as if seeking reassurance. Without thinking, he stroked her head, feeling the rapid pulse beneath his fingers. Will they make it? He asked quietly. Dr. Vasquez surveyed the 5 struggling puppies. The next 24 hours will tell. The black-marked male and the solid brown are in the worst shape. The others have a better chance. I'm not equipped for this, Marcus admitted. I haven't worked with puppies, especially not newborns. Well, Mr. Reynolds, you're all they've got right now, Dr. Vasquez replied simply, and they've got me for what it's worth. As if understanding her words, the grey-marked female puppy raised her head and looked directly at Marcus, her gaze steady and unblinking. In that moment, something shifted inside him, a feeling he hadn't experienced since before his last deployment, a sense of purpose beyond survival. I'll need supplies, he said decisively. Formula, heating pads, whatever else they need. They can help with that, Dr. Vasquez nodded, and I'll come back tonight to check on them. As Dr. Vasquez prepared to leave to gather more supplies, Marcus remained by the fireplace with the puppies. The grey-marked female had finally lain down, her eyes half closed, but still watching him. The fawn-colored female had curled up beside her, while the tan one dozed fitfully. The dark brown male remained wary, staying at the edge of the group. The black-marked runt still hadn't moved much, his breathing shallow. Marcus settled on the floor beside them, realizing he was committed now. These abandoned puppies needed him. And maybe in some way he couldn't yet define, he needed them too. You're safe now, Marcus whispered to the watching grey-marked female. I promise. For the first time since returning from war, Marcus Reynolds made a promise he intended to keep. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The first night with the puppies stretched into an endless vigil. Marcus converted the living room into a makeshift nursery, arranging blankets and towels into a soft nest near the fireplace. He positioned his uncle's old recliner where he could monitor all 5 Malinois puppies simultaneously. Dr. Vasquez had returned with supplies, specialized puppy formula, antibiotics, electrolyte solutions, heating pads, and soft blankets. She demonstrated the proper bottle-feeding technique before departing reluctantly. Every 2 hours, she'd instructed, even through the night, especially for the black-marked runt. He's hanging by a thread now. In the quiet darkness, broken only by the soft glow of the fire and a small lamp, Marcus checked his watch. Midnight. Time for another feeding. He moved carefully toward the makeshift nest where the puppies rested, their small bodies finally warm after hours of gradual temperature. Elevation. The grey-marked female. He'd started thinking of her as Shadow, lifted her head immediately, ears moving to track his approach despite her young age. "Just me," Marcus whispered. "Easy, girl." The black-marked runt lay motionless, except for the shallow rise and fall of his tiny ribcage. Marcus gently cradled his small body, supporting his head while coaxing the specialized bottle's nipple between his lips. The puppy suckled weakly, eyes remaining closed. "Come on, little guy," Marcus urged. "Just a little more." Behind him, Shadow watched intently as if understanding the gravity of the situation. The tan female had improved dramatically after just a few feedings, already showing signs of her spirited nature by pawing at the blankets. The fawn-colored female dozed peacefully, her condition stabilized. The dark brown male remained skittish, retreating whenever Marcus approached, but had managed to drink from a shallow pan. As dawn broke, Marcus stepped onto the cabin's porch to stretch his cramped muscles. The eastern sky blazed with pink and orange light, reflecting brilliantly off snow-covered peaks. Despite his exhaustion after a night of 2-hour feeding intervals, a strange sort of peace had settled over him. For months since his medical discharge, he'd struggled with sleeplessness, his mind replaying scenes from combat in vivid detail, particularly the IED explosion that had injured him and killed Vega, his canine partner of 4 years. Last night, focused entirely on keeping the puppies alive, he'd found temporary respite from those memories. The sound of an approaching vehicle drew his attention. Dr. Vasquez's white SUV came bouncing down the snow-covered drive, pulling to a stop near the cabin. She emerged carrying her medical bag and a tray of coffee cups. "Thought you might need this," she said, offering him a steaming cup. "How was the night?" "4 of them are holding steady," Marcus reported, accepting the coffee gratefully. "The runt hasn't improved much, still barely drinking." Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly and followed him inside. After examining each puppy thoroughly, she confirmed Marcus's assessment. "Shadow and the tan one are fighters," she said, using the name Marcus had coined without commentary. "The fawn and dark. Brown are stabilizing, but the runt—" She shook her head. "We're doing everything we can," she continued, "but sometimes it's not enough." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I'm not giving up on him." "I didn't suggest you should," Dr. Vasquez replied, her voice softening. "Just preparing you." She helped him change the bedding and showed him how to check for signs of infection around the electronic devices on their necks. Up close, Marcus could see they were more sophisticated than he'd initially thought. Each contained microprocessors, tiny sensors pressed against the puppy's skin, and what appeared to be GPS tracking capability. "I've been thinking about these devices," Dr. Vasquez said, examining the code on Shadow's collar, ASO K17. "It's obviously some kind of experimental monitoring system, but it's not standard practice to tag puppies this young or this intrusively. And these codes, military designation protocols," Marcus said, watching as Shadow nuzzled his hand, seeking attention. "Atlas Security Operations, K-Series, numbers 14 through 18. They're tracking these puppies as part of a development program." "Why would they abandon them?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "That's what bothers me," Marcus frowned. "Atlas is a multi-billion-dollar operation. Kane Blackwell doesn't make mistakes. These puppies were left deliberately, but why?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I have a colleague who used to work for a private military contractor. Let me make some calls." While Dr. Vasquez stepped outside to use her phone, Marcus continued tending to the puppies. Shadow followed him as he moved around the room, displaying an unusual level of awareness for such a young animal. The tan female had taken to nipping at his sleeve whenever he was within reach, demanding attention. "You need names," Marcus told them, scratching Shadow's head. "Can't keep calling you by your markings." He studied the tan female, noting the energy that seemed to radiate from her despite her ordeal. Ember, he decided, all that fire inside you. The dark brown male watched warily from the corner, tensing when Marcus looked his way. Ranger for you, always on alert. The fawn-colored female's gentle demeanor had been evident from the start, her patience remarkable as Marcus tended to her. And you're Willow, he said, stroking her soft coat, bending but not breaking. Finally, he knelt beside the struggling black-marked runt, whose life seemed to hang in balance with each shallow breath. And you're Scout, he whispered, small but seeing things others miss. Dr. Vasquez returned, her expression troubled. My contact couldn't tell me much, said he signed too many non-disclosure agreements, but he did mention that Atlas has been developing an enhanced canine program, something about genetic modifications for specialized military applications. What does that have to do with abandoning puppies? Marcus asked, helping her prepare the next round of formula. I'm not sure yet, she replied, but he seemed frightened, said I should drop it, that Atlas doesn't tolerate people asking questions. Marcus looked down at the puppies, at Shadow's steady gaze, at Scout's struggling form. Well, I'm asking questions, he said firmly. Someone needs to answer for this. Dr. Vasquez studied him. You're not planning to keep them, are you? Once they're healthy, they should go to a proper rescue facility. I haven't thought that far ahead, Marcus admitted. Right now, I just want them to survive. But even as he said it, he knew something had changed. These abandoned puppies had awakened something in him, a protective instinct he thought had died in Afghanistan alongside Vega. Later that afternoon, Tom Garcia arrived, his ancient blue pickup struggling through the snow. The elderly rancher had been Marcus's uncle's closest friend, though Marcus himself barely knew the man. He'd been overseas when his uncle had his heart attack, and by the time he returned, the funeral was over, and Tom was one of the few neighbors who still checked on the property. Tom moved with the deliberate pace of a man who had seen more than his share of winters, his weathered face deeply lined beneath a well-worn cowboy hat. His Native American heritage was evident in his high cheekbones, and the quiet dignity with which he carried himself. Heard you found some trouble, Tom said by way of greeting, eyeing the puppies with interest. News travels fast, Marcus replied. Small mountain community, Tom shrugged. Elena Vasquez stops by the general store, mentions she's treating abandoned puppies at the Reynolds place. Folks notice. He followed Marcus to the makeshift nest, his experienced eyes taking in the situation at a glance. Military dogs, he said, nodding toward the electronic devices. Atlas Securities work, I'd bet. You know about Atlas? Marcus asked, surprised. Tom's expression darkened. Everyone around here knows Atlas. Company bought the old military. Testing grounds up near Thunder Basin 3 years ago. Been running some kind of canine enhancement program. Very hush-hush, lots of security. Locals who work there don't talk about it. He knelt with surprising agility for his age, examining each puppy carefully. When he reached Shadow, the grey-marked female met his gaze steadily. This one has the old spirit, Tom said approvingly. Reminds me of the wolves I used to track as a boy, before they were driven from these mountains. Dr. Vasquez thinks Atlas is breeding them for specific traits, Marcus explained. Tom nodded slowly. Heard rumors. They take promising puppies from top military working lines, claim they're developing more effective service dogs, but really they're experimenting with their genetics, trying to create some kind of super dog they can sell to military and police, forces worldwide. But why abandon these 5? Marcus pressed. Maybe they didn't measure up, Tom suggested grimly. Not perfect enough for Atlas standards. The idea made Marcus's blood boil. He'd seen enough killing, enough disregard. For life in war zones. To think that these puppies had been discarded like defective products was infuriating. "Scout isn't doing well," he said, changing the subject. Tom moved to the runt's side, placing a gnarled hand on the tiny puppy's back. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. "An old remedy," he explained, opening the pouch to reveal dried herbs. "My grandmother taught me, mix it with the milk, help strengthen a weak spirit." Marcus hesitated, but something in Tom's confident manner made him trust the old man. "I'll try anything at this point." They mixed the herbs with Scout's next bottle, and to Marcus's surprise, the puppy suckled with slightly more vigor than before. "No guarantees," Tom cautioned, "but sometimes the old ways help when the new ones fail." As evening approached, Tom prepared to leave. "I'll bring some better supplies tomorrow. What you have is good for emergencies, but these little ones need specialized care." "I appreciate the help," Marcus said. Tom paused at the door. "Your uncle would be glad to see you doing this. He always said you had a way with animals, even when you were small." The comment caught Marcus off guard. His relationship with his uncle had been complicated, a mixture of respect and distance that had only widened during his years in the military. "I barely remember that part of myself," Marcus admitted. "It's still there," Tom said simply. "Those puppies can sense it. That's why they're responding to you." After Tom left, Marcus sat with the puppies as darkness fell again. Shadow had positioned herself protectively near Scout, while Ember and Willow rested nearby. Even Ranger had crept closer to the group, though he still maintained his cautious distance from Marcus. The night was peaceful until just after midnight, when Marcus was startled awake by the sound of a vehicle approaching, headlights sweeping across the cabin windows as it turned up his driveway. He reached instinctively for the sidearm he kept nearby, a habit from his military days, and moved to the window. A black SUV with tinted windows had parked in front of the house. A woman in an expensive-looking winter coat emerged, her posture radiating authority even in the dim porch light. Marcus could see she was attractive in a cold, polished way, her blonde hair pulled back severely from her face. "Mr. Reynolds," she called out, spotting him through the window. "I'm Alexis Crawford, Director of Special Projects at Atlas Security Operations." Marcus's grip tightened on his sidearm, though he kept it pointed downward as he opened the door. The night air rushed in, carrying the scent of expensive perfume that seemed jarringly out of place among the pine and snow. "It's past midnight, Miss Crawford," Marcus said, his voice hardening. "Not exactly business hours." Alexis Crawford smiled thinly, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "This is rather urgent. I understand you found some canine subjects that belong to our breeding program." "I found 5 puppies abandoned to die in sub-zero temperatures," Marcus corrected, deliberately blocking the doorway with his solid frame. "If they're yours, that raises some serious questions." Crawford maintained her professional demeanor despite the cold. "There's been an unfortunate misunderstanding. Those puppies were part of a transport that had an accident. We've been searching for them. We're grateful you found them and would like to collect them immediately." "A transport accident?" Marcus repeated skeptically. "That left them miles from any road, with no tracks except a single set of footprints leading in. Conveniently tagged with your company's monitoring devices? The details aren't important," she said dismissively. "What matters is that they're Atlas security property. I have the paperwork in my vehicle. We're prepared to compensate you for any inconvenience, of course." "They're not going anywhere," Marcus stated firmly. "They're in critical condition from being abandoned. One might not make it through the night." Crawford's expression hardened. "Mr. Reynolds, I don't think you understand. These aren't ordinary puppies. They're part of a proprietary breeding program worth millions. They belong to Atlas." "Then you should have taken better care of them," Marcus replied evenly. "Right now, they're staying here under a veterinarian's care. This is a matter of animal welfare." "This is a mistake," Crawford warned, her voice taking on an edge. "Kane Blackwell doesn't appreciate people interfering with his business. And I don't appreciate finding dying puppies on my property," Marcus countered. "If you want to discuss this further, come back during daylight hours with a better explanation." They stared at each other for a long moment, the silence broken only by the soft whine of one of the puppies from inside the cabin. Finally, Crawford reached into her purse and extracted a business card. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Reynolds, soon." She turned on her heel and returned to the SUV, which reversed smoothly and disappeared down the driveway, its taillights soon swallowed by the darkness. Marcus remained on the porch long after the vehicle had vanished, his mind racing. The woman's arrival confirmed his suspicions. These puppies were important to Atlas for some reason, and her story about a transport accident was clearly fabrication. Inside, he found Shadow standing alert, ears pricked forward as if she'd been listening to the entire exchange. The grey-marked puppy locked eyes with Marcus, and in that moment a silent understanding passed between them. "They'll be back," Marcus told the puppy, reaching out to stroke her head. "But I won't let them." "Take you." As if in response, Shadow leaned into his touch, and for the first time since returning from war, Marcus felt the cold knot in his chest begin to loosen. Whatever Atlas wanted with these puppies, they would have to go through him to get them. Morning arrived with a sense of foreboding that Marcus couldn't shake. As he tended to the puppies, administering their medications and preparing their formula, his mind kept returning to Alexis Crawford's midnight visit. The cold determination in her eyes told him this matter was far from resolved. Scout had made it through another night, though his condition remained precarious. Tom's herbal remedy seemed to have helped, but the black-marked runt still struggled with each breath. Shadow stayed close to the weaker puppy, occasionally nudging him as if encouraging him to keep fighting. "Never seen anything like it," Dr. Vasquez commented upon her morning arrival. "Shadow, you called her. She's acting like a pack leader. That's unusual behavior for a puppy her age." "There's something special about her," Marcus agreed, watching as Shadow positioned herself between them and Scout, ears flicking alertly. "They're all showing remarkable resilience," Dr. Vasquez said, completing her examination, "considering what they've been through." Marcus described Crawford's late-night visit while the veterinarian listened intently, her frown deepening with each detail. "A transport accident," she scoffed. "That's obviously a lie. These puppies were systematically abandoned. The question is why." "Tom suggested they didn't measure up to Atlas standards," Marcus said. "That they're culling puppies, that don't fit their breeding program." Dr. Vasquez's expression hardened. "If that's true, it's not just unethical, it's illegal, especially if these are experimental animals." A soft whine from Ranger interrupted them. The dark brown male had been the most traumatized of the group, but this morning he cautiously approached Marcus for the first time, sniffing at his outstretched hand before retreating to a safe distance. "He's starting to trust you," Dr. Vasquez observed. "They all are." "Small victories," Marcus murmured, though he felt a surprising surge of pride. After Dr. Vasquez left to attend other patients, promising to return that evening, Marcus decided to make a supply run to town. The puppies were stable enough to leave for a short time, and he needed more formula and bedding. He also wanted information, anything that might explain Atlas's interest in these particular puppies. Summit Ridge was a small mountain town that had seen better days. Once a thriving mining community, it had transitioned to tourism and ranching as its primary industries. The main street consisted of a handful of weathered buildings, a general store, a diner, a feed supply, and a small sheriff's office. Marcus parked in front of Mountain Supply and Feed, a sprawling warehouse-like structure that smelled of sweet grain and leather. The owner, a heavy-set woman named Maggie Wilson, greeted him with casual familiarity. Marcus Reynolds. Heard you're running a canine nursery these days. Word travels fast, Marcus commented, selecting bags of specialized bedding. Small mountain town, Maggie shrugged, echoing Tom's words from the day before. Those puppies causing quite a stir, especially since Atlas security folks were in here yesterday asking questions. Marcus's head snapped up. What kind of questions? Wanted to know if anyone had come in buying supplies for newborn puppies. Seemed mighty interested in their whereabouts. Maggie leaned on the counter. I played dumb. Never much cared for Atlas or their secretive operation. They've brought nothing but trouble since they set up shop at the old military grounds. I need to understand what I'm dealing with, Marcus said. How much do you know about Atlas security? Maggie glanced around the empty store before lowering her voice. Official story is they're developing enhanced service dogs for military and police work. Unofficial story is they've been manipulating canine genetics for years, trying to create some kind of super dog they can patent and control. Would they abandon puppies that don't meet their criteria? Marcus suggested. Wouldn't put it past them. Maggie nodded grimly. Blackwell doesn't tolerate imperfection. Man's obsessed with creating the perfect military working dog. As Maggie rang up Marcus's purchases, the bell above the door jingled. Sheriff Derek Harmon stepped inside, his uniform crisp despite the cold, badge gleaming on his chest. He nodded to Maggie before turning to Marcus. Mr. Reynolds, he said formally, mind if we have a word? Marcus followed the sheriff outside, an uneasy feeling settling in his stomach. Got a complaint this morning, Harmon said without preamble. From Atlas Security. Says you're in possession of company property. 5 Belgian Malinois puppies, specifically. I found 5 abandoned puppies dying in the cold, Marcus corrected. If they're Atlas's, that raises serious questions about animal cruelty. The sheriff's expression remained neutral. Ms. Crawford claims there was a transport accident, said they've been looking for those puppies. That's a lie, Marcus stated flatly. Those puppies were deliberately left to die. They were miles from any road, no signs of a vehicle or accident, just 5 newborns with Atlas's tags on them, trapped in a snowdrift. Harmon studied him for a long moment. You're sure about that? I've got a veterinarian who can confirm, and their condition. Dr. Vasquez has been treating them since I found them. The sheriff nodded slowly. Elena's good people. If she backs your story, that carries weight. He adjusted his hat against the glare of the sun reflecting off snow. Look, Reynolds, I don't have a dog in this fight, but Atlas has a lot of influence around here. They're talking about filing theft charges. Let them try, Marcus replied, anger flaring. I've got nothing to hide. Just giving you a heads up, Harmon said. This might get complicated. He turned to leave, then hesitated. How are they doing, the puppies? The unexpected concern in the sheriff's voice caught Marcus off guard. 4 are improving, 1's touch and go. Harmon nodded. My daughter keeps dogs, beautiful animals. With that, he returned to his patrol car and drove away. Back at the cabin, Marcus found Tom Garcia sitting on the porch steps, a thermos beside him. Brought you some coffee, the older man said, rising stiffly, and more of that herb mix for the runt. Thanks, Marcus replied, unloading his supplies from the truck. Had a visit from the sheriff in town. Atlas is filing theft charges. Tom's weathered face remained impassive. Not surprised, Atlas doesn't like losing control of anything. They entered the cabin together, finding the puppies alert and responsive. Even Scout had shown marginal improvement, managing to stand for brief periods on trembling legs. Shadow approached them immediately, whining softly in greeting. As Marcus prepared fresh bedding, Tom knelt beside each puppy, examining them with experienced hands. When he reached Shadow, he paused, his expression thoughtful. This one, he said, indicating the grey-marked female, she has the mark. A monitoring device? Marcus asked, confused. No, this. Tom pointed to a small white marking on Shadow's chest, barely visible beneath her grey fur. It formed an irregular star pattern. In our stories, dogs with this mark were spirit guides, messengers between worlds. Marcus hadn't noticed the marking before. What does it mean? It means this is no ordinary puppy, Tom replied. The old ones would say she was born with purpose. While Marcus wasn't sure about mystical interpretations, he had to admit there was something unique about Shadow. The grey-marked puppy watched them with an intensity that seemed beyond her weeks, her movements deliberate and measured, unlike the other puppies. Tom helped prepare the formula for the afternoon feeding, adding his herbal mixture to Scout's portion. As they worked, he shared stories of the wolf packs that had once roamed freely through the mountains before government eradication programs and human encroachment had decimated their numbers. My grandfather could speak their language, Tom said, not with words, but with the heart. He said canines carried ancient wisdom in their blood. That's why men like Blackwell want to control them, to harness that wisdom for profit. Marcus considered the old man's words as he bottle-fed Scout. The runt suckled with more vigor today, his eyes open and alert for the first time since his rescue. He's fighting, Marcus observed. They all are, Tom nodded. Question is, are you ready to fight for them? Before Marcus could answer, the sound of approaching vehicles drew their attention. Through the cabin window, they could see 3 black SUVs pulling up to the house, snow billowing behind them. Looks like Atlas isn't waiting for the legal system, Tom commented grimly. Marcus passed Scout to Tom and moved to the door, positioning himself between the cabin and the approaching threat. Alexis Crawford emerged from the lead vehicle, followed by 2 men in tactical gear and several others who looked more like security personnel than executives. Behind them, a man in an expensive suit and overcoat stepped out, his silver hair and commanding presence marking him instantly as someone accustomed to authority. Marcus recognized him from news articles. Kane Blackwell himself, CEO of Atlas. Security operations? Mr. Reynolds, Crawford called out, her voice carrying across the snow-covered yard. I told you we'd be in touch. I have the legal paperwork here demanding the immediate return of Atlas security property. Marcus stood his ground. Those puppies were abandoned to die. That's animal cruelty. I've reported it to Sheriff Harmon. Crawford's smile didn't reach her eyes. A misunderstanding that's been cleared up. The sheriff understands it was an unfortunate accident. Now please step aside and let our team collect the puppies. No, Marcus stated firmly. They're not healthy enough to be moved. One of the men in tactical gear stepped forward, extending a document. This is a court order signed this morning by Judge Reynolds authorizing the repossession of research. Animals identified with Atlas security operations markings. Marcus didn't take the paper. Judge Reynolds signed this without hearing my side. Judge Reynolds understands the value of these animals to our research program, Crawford replied smoothly. Now we can do this the easy way, or we can have you arrested for theft and obstruction. From inside the cabin, Tom emerged, his tall figure silhouetted in the doorway. You're on private property, he called out, and those puppies are evidence in an animal cruelty investigation. Crawford turned her cold gaze to the elderly rancher. Mr. Garcia, still interfering in matters that don't concern you, I see. Cruelty to animals concerns everyone, Tom replied evenly. Kane Blackwell stepped forward, his calculating eyes assessing Marcus. Sergeant Reynolds, distinguished service record, K9 handler with 2 combat tours, Silver Star recipient. His tone was conversational, almost friendly. You understand better than most the importance of our work. Those puppies represent the future of military working dogs, assets that will save countless lives. I understand abandoning animals to die, Marcus replied. I understand tracking devices on puppies young enough that their eyes have barely opened. Whatever you're doing, it's not about saving lives. The tension was broken by the arrival of another vehicle. Dr. Vasquez's white SUV skidded to a stop beside the Atlas vehicles. She jumped out, medical bag in hand. "What's going on here?" she demanded, striding forward. "Dr. Vasquez," Crawford acknowledged, with barely concealed annoyance. "This doesn't involve you. As the treating veterinarian for these puppies, it absolutely involves me," Dr. Vasquez countered. "They're under my medical care and not stable enough for transport." Crawford signaled to her security team. "Remove them anyway, carefully." As the men moved toward the cabin, Marcus stepped into their path. "Touch those puppies and you'll regret it." The lead security man, a burly figure with a military bearing, sized up Marcus. "Don't make this difficult, buddy. We've got a court order. And I've got 5 witnesses to animal abandonment," Marcus shot back, "including a veterinarian who documented their condition." Dr. Vasquez pulled out her phone. "I've already sent photos and medical reports to the State Veterinary Board and animal welfare authorities. Move those puppies now, and you'll be adding charges of endangerment to the existing cruelty investigation." Crawford's composed facade cracked slightly. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. These animals are part of a proprietary breeding program that represents millions in research investment." "Is that why you left them to die?" Marcus challenged. "Because they didn't meet your standards?" A flicker of surprise crossed Crawford's face before she regained control. "I don't know what you're talking about. There was a transport accident." "Whom?" "There was no accident," Tom interrupted. "Those puppies were culled, left to die because they didn't match Atlas's perfect vision. It's been happening for years." Kane Blackwell, who had been observing the exchange with calculated interest, stepped forward. "Perhaps we should discuss this more productively. Mr. Reynolds, you're clearly someone who understands the value of elite working dogs. You've seen firsthand how they save lives in combat situations." "I've also seen how they're treated as expendable equipment by people like you," Marcus replied coldly. "A regrettable but necessary reality in some operational contexts," Blackwell continued smoothly. "What we're developing at Atlas goes beyond traditional K9 programs. These puppies are part of a revolutionary breeding initiative, one that will produce dogs with unprecedented capabilities. The kind that could have saved your partner, Vega, wasn't it?" The mention of his deceased K9 partner hit Marcus like a physical blow. "Don't you dare use her name. My point is that dogs with enhanced capabilities, stronger, faster, more intelligent, will save both human and canine lives. Surely that's worth some difficult decisions along the way." "Abandoning puppies isn't a difficult decision. It's cruelty," Dr. Vasquez interjected. "What kind of capabilities could possibly justify that?" Blackwell turned to Crawford, speaking in hushed tones. After a tense exchange, she faced Marcus again. "This isn't over, Mr. Reynolds. Those puppies legally belong to Atlas, regardless of how they came into your possession. We'll return with additional legal measures." "And I'll be ready," Marcus promised, "with documentation of everything I've found." With a final glare, Crawford and her team retreated to their vehicles. Kane Blackwell lingered a moment longer, his gaze calculating as it moved from Marcus to the cabin where the puppies remained. "You're making a mistake, Sergeant. Not all battles are worth fighting." With that, he joined the others, and the convoy of black SUVs pulled away. As they disappeared down the driveway, Dr. Vasquez let out a breath she'd been holding. "That was too close," she said. "But they'll be back with more firepower. Kane Blackwell has half the judges in the county in his pocket." "Then we need to move fast," Marcus replied. "Gather evidence. Find out exactly what Atlas is doing with these puppies." Dr. Vasquez nodded. "I've already reached out to some contacts at the state level. If we can prove systematic animal cruelty, we can get the authorities involved who aren't under Blackwell's influence." Inside the cabin, the puppies had huddled together during the confrontation, with Shadow standing protectively in front of the others. As Marcus approached, the grey-marked puppy met his gaze steadily, as if understanding the battle that was brewing. "We need to know more about these devices," Marcus said, examining the electronic tag on Shadow's neck. ASOK-17. What data they're collecting, and why these 5 specifically were targeted for disposal. Tom knelt beside Scout, checking the runt's condition after the stress of the confrontation. In the old days, breeders would cull animals that didn't match the desired traits, but modern breeding operations use genetic testing, embryo selection. They don't typically wait until after birth to decide, unless they were looking for something that only manifests after birth, Dr. Vasquez suggested thoughtfully. Some traits can't be predicted purely from genetics. As they spoke, Ember nudged Marcus insistently, seeking attention. Her fiery personality had emerged more each day, a stark contrast to her near-death state when he had found her. Willow grazed Marcus's arm with gentle lips, while Ranger observed from a cautious distance, still wary but no longer panicking at human presence. "They're all showing distinct personalities," Marcus observed, "even at this young age. Temperament has always been the hardest thing to breed for," Tom noted. "You can select for size, color, physical attributes, but heart and spirit, those come from somewhere deeper." Dr. Vasquez checked her watch. "I need to make some calls, see if I can get state inspectors out here before Atlas tries again. In the meantime, document everything. Feeding schedules, medications, progress notes. We need to build a case." After she left, Marcus and Tom continued caring for the puppies. The confrontation had drained them all, but there was a new sense of purpose in their actions. These 5 young lives had become the center of a battle that was clearly about more than just ownership. As evening settled over the ranch, Marcus sat in the doorway, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Shadow stood beside him, the puppy's small body radiating a surprising warmth and solidity. "What makes you so special?" Marcus murmured, stroking her grey coat. "What is Atlas so afraid of?" Shadow turned her head, meeting Marcus's gaze with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. In that moment, something shifted in Marcus's perception. These weren't just abandoned animals he was caring for out of duty or compassion. They had become something more, a cause worth fighting for, a purpose that had been missing since he'd left the battlefield. Tom joined him, easing down onto a nearby chair with a soft grunt. "Beautiful evening," he commented, gazing at the sunset. "Hard to believe people are capable of such cruelty on days like this." "People have always been capable of both great beauty and terrible darkness," Marcus replied. "The question is which one we choose to serve." They sat in companionable silence as darkness crept across the land. The stars emerged one by one, brilliant in the clear mountain sky, untouched by city lights. "My grandfather used to say that stars are the campfires of those who have gone before us," Tom said softly. "Watching over the living, guiding our way." Marcus thought of his parents, of his uncle, of his fallen comrades, of Vega, wondering if they were indeed watching. Would they approve of this new battle he'd chosen? "I think they would," Tom said, as if reading his thoughts. "Standing against cruelty is always the right path." Inside the cabin, the puppies settled for the night, their soft breathing a counterpoint to the chorus of night insects outside. Scout had shown more improvement throughout the day, standing longer, drinking more eagerly. His eyes, once dull with pain, now held a spark of life. "He's going to make it," Marcus realized aloud. "Because you gave him a chance," Tom replied. "Sometimes that's all any of us need." As Tom departed for the night, promising to return at dawn, Marcus prepared for another vigil in the cabin. He checked each puppy one last time, ensuring they were comfortable and secure. When he reached Shadow, the grey-marked puppy was already watching him, ears pricked forward attentively. "We've got trouble coming," Marcus told her quietly. "Atlas won't give up easily." Shadow snorted softly as if in agreement. Then, with deliberate movements, the puppy stepped closer and leaned her head against Marcus's hand, a gesture of trust so profound it caught him off guard. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet breathing of 5 young lives he'd pulled back from the brink, Marcus Reynolds made a silent vow. Whatever Atlas was hiding, whatever cruel purpose had led to these puppies being abandoned, he would uncover it. And no matter what legal or political pressure they brought to bear, he would protect these 5 Malinois with everything he had. The battle lines were drawn, and for the first time since returning from war, Marcus felt truly alive. The next morning dawned with a heaviness in the air that had nothing to do with the Colorado winter. Marcus had spent another night in the cabin, dozing fitfully between feedings, his senses alert to any unusual sounds. He knew Atlas wouldn't give up easily. Scout had turned a corner during the night, standing on his own for nearly 10 minutes before lying down again. The improvement felt like a personal victory. Ember continued to show her spirited nature, prancing around the living room whenever Marcus approached. Willow remained gentle and sweet, while Ranger had begun cautiously accepting Marcus's touch, without flinching, and Shadow, the grey-marked female, continued to display an awareness that seemed beyond her weeks, watching over the others like a seasoned pack leader. Dr. Vasquez arrived early, carrying a stack of documents along with her. "Medical bag. I've been up all night researching Atlas," she announced, spreading papers across the kitchen table. "What they're doing goes deeper than we thought." Marcus studied the materials, printouts of scientific articles, breeding records, and financial statements. "What am I looking at?" "Atlas Security Operations isn't just breeding dogs," Dr. Vasquez explained, pointing to a highlighted section. "They're creating a monopoly on military working dog genetics. They've been systematically collecting DNA from elite working lines, patenting specific genetic sequences, and using them to develop what they call enhanced biological assets they can control exclusively." "How is that legal?" Marcus asked. "The legality is questionable, but they've exploited loopholes," she continued. "They claim they're advancing canine capabilities for national security, but in reality, they're privatizing what should be public resource, the genetic heritage of working dog breeds developed over centuries." Tom arrived as they were talking, carrying fresh supplies and homemade dog biscuits for when the puppies were old enough. He listened intently as Dr. Vasquez continued. "I managed to get in touch with a geneticist who consulted for them briefly. She was disturbed by what she saw. According to her, Atlas isn't just selecting for physical traits. They're attempting to breed for specific cognitive and behavioral characteristics." "Like what?" Marcus asked. "Enhanced intelligence, improved scent discrimination, reduced stress response, extended memory retention. They want dogs with unprecedented capabilities, but with perfect obedience. Dogs that can process complex environments like humans, but follow commands without question." Frank shook his head. "They're trying to remove the very essence that makes dogs what they are. Their independent spirit, their natural instincts." "Exactly," Dr. Vasquez nodded. "And these puppies," she gestured to the 5 Malinois watching them curiously, "might represent failures in that program. Puppies that showed early signs of being too independent, too willful." Marcus's gaze drifted to Shadow, who stood alert, ears pricked toward their conversation. "That's why they want them back so badly. Not to save them, but to eliminate evidence of their culling practices. And I've contacted state authorities and federal animal welfare officials," Dr. Vasquez said. "But Atlas has powerful friends. It could take time to get a proper investigation." Time we may not have, Marcus replied grimly. We need more concrete evidence of what they're doing. Their planning was interrupted by the sound of tires on snow. Through the window, they could see a sleek, white luxury SUV pulling up beside Dr. Vasquez's vehicle. A tall, distinguished man in his mid-60s emerged. Not Kane Blackwell, but someone equally imposing in his bearing. Dr. Victor Reinhardt, Tom muttered. Atlas's chief scientist himself. He came personally, Dr. Vasquez said, surprise evident in her voice. We must have hit a nerve. Marcus stepped outside to meet the visitor, aware of how disheveled he must appear after a night with the puppies. Reinhardt approached with the measured gait of an academic, his silver beard neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. Sergeant Reynolds, he said, extending a gloved hand. Dr. Victor Reinhardt, Director of Canine Enhancement Research at Atlas. I believe we have a scientific matter to discuss. Marcus ignored the outstretched hand. Nothing scientific about abandoning puppies to die in freezing temperatures. Reinhardt's polite expression didn't waver. A regrettable situation that was never authorized. The staff member responsible has been terminated. We're grateful you found our research subjects and would like to resolve this matter professionally. Research subjects? Marcus repeated, anger building. They're living creatures. One nearly died. Indeed they are. Very special living creatures, Reinhardt agreed. Part of a groundbreaking program that will revolutionize working dogs' capabilities. These particular subjects represent an experimental cohort testing cognitive development variables. You mean they're the results? Of genetic manipulation, Marcus stated flatly. Reinhardt studied him with new interest. You're well informed. Yes, these subjects contain specific genetic modifications designed to enhance their intelligence, sensory capabilities, and working memory. They're incredibly valuable to our research, not commercially but scientifically. If they're so valuable, why were they abandoned? As I said, an unauthorized action by a staff member who's no longer with us, Reinhardt replied smoothly. A tragic error in judgment. I don't believe you, Marcus said. Those puppies were deliberately left to die, with active monitoring devices still attached. That's not a field employee making a mistake. That's a calculated decision. Reinhardt's expression shifted subtly. May I see them? As their primary researcher, I'm concerned about their development. Marcus hesitated, then nodded curtly. You can observe them from the doorway. They're not to be disturbed. Inside the cabin, the puppies had gathered near the fireplace. Shadow immediately moved to the front of the group, positioning herself protectively before the others, her eyes fixed on the newcomer with unmistakable wariness. Reinhardt's reaction was revealing. He stopped abruptly, staring at Shadow with an expression of both surprise and calculation. Subject Case 17, he murmured. Extraordinary. The developmental markers are already evident. His gaze moved to the others. K14 through K18, the complete cohort. Remarkable that they've all survived. They have names, Marcus said coldly. Shadow, Ember, Willow, Ranger, and Scout. How quaint, Reinhardt replied absently, his attention fixed on the puppies. But they're so much more than pets, Sergeant Reynolds. K17, your Shadow, represents a particular breakthrough. Early indicators suggest she's developing cognitive mapping abilities far beyond any canine we've documented. She may be the first success in creating a true, hyper-intelligent working dog. Is that why she was abandoned? Because she's too intelligent? Reinhardt's expression became guarded. There appears to have been a misinterpretation of preliminary data. Her independence markers were flagged as potential behavioral instability, but the more recent analytics suggest it's actually an indicator of accelerated decision-making capacity. You're saying someone thought she was defective, but she's actually what you wanted all along? Marcus translated. And now you want her back. All 5 subjects are important to continuing our research, Reinhardt corrected. But yes, K-17 is of particular interest. I'm prepared to offer you a position. With Atlas, Sergeant Reynolds, your background as an elite K9 handler makes you uniquely qualified to work with these advanced animals. Full benefits, substantial salary, and of course, continued access to the puppies you've so admirably rescued. The offer caught Marcus off guard. It was clever, appealing to both his financial needs and his attachment to the puppies. For a brief moment he considered it. Then Shadow whined softly, drawing his attention to her steady gaze. Not interested, Marcus said firmly. Reinhardt sighed. I'd hoped to resolve this collegially. These animals represent years of research and millions in investment. They're not ordinary puppies, Sergeant Reynolds. They've been genetically modified for specific purposes. In a very real sense, they're patented technology. They're living beings, Dr. Vasquez interjected, stepping forward. And under current animal welfare laws, your research appears highly questionable. Abandoning them alone would trigger a federal investigation, which is why we're eager to recover them quietly, Reinhardt replied. Let me be transparent. These puppies are part of a classified defense contract. Their development has national security implications. Continued obstruction could be construed as interference with matters beyond civilian purview. Are you threatening him? Tom asked, his usually calm voice hardening. Merely clarifying the stakes, Reinhardt replied. Atlas is prepared to pursue all legal avenues to recover these research subjects, or, he turned back to Marcus, we could work together. You clearly care about these animals. Help us develop their potential in a controlled scientific environment. So you can create more puppies to abandon when they don't meet your specifications, Marcus challenged. Something cold flickered in Reinhardt's eyes. You misunderstand our work. These are prototype organisms engineered for specific capabilities. When prototypes don't meet design parameters, resources are redirected. It's not cruelty. It's scientific methodology. The clinical detachment in his voice sent a chill through the room. This wasn't someone who saw the puppies as living creatures deserving compassion. He viewed them as products, experiments to be discarded. If flawed. I think we're done here, Marcus said quietly. Reinhardt studied him a moment longer. I'll leave my card. When Atlas's legal team obtains the federal seizure order, which they will, contact me if you'd prefer a more amicable resolution. He placed a business card on the table. For what it's worth, I am impressed with your care of these subjects. They appear to be developing well, despite the suboptimal conditions. After Reinhardt departed, the cabin seemed to exhale collectively. Even the puppies, who had remained unusually still during the scientist's presence, resumed their activities. Ember pawing at a toy, Willow stretching, Ranger cautiously exploring the perimeter of their area. Only Shadow remained alert, her eyes fixed on Marcus as if waiting for his reaction. They're not just ordinary puppies, are they? Dr. Vasquez said at last, breaking the tense silence. No, Marcus admitted, kneeling beside Shadow and examining her more closely. But whatever Atlas did to them doesn't give them the right to treat them as disposable experiments. Tom moved to the window, watching Reinhardt's vehicle disappear down the snow-covered drive. He confirmed what we suspected. They're culling puppies that don't meet their standards, only they call it redirecting resources and cloak it in scientific language. And they're using genetic modification, Dr. Vasquez added. That changes the legal landscape. There are strict regulations about genetically modified organisms, especially mammals. Marcus stroked Shadow's head thoughtfully. Reinhardt seemed particularly interested in her, called her a breakthrough, yet someone at Atlas decided she should be eliminated. Why? The independence he mentioned, Tom suggested. They want dogs with enhanced intelligence, but perfect obedience. Maybe Shadow's intelligence comes with a will they can't control. As if understanding, Shadow leaned against Marcus's hand, her eyes never leaving his face. We need to know more, Marcus decided, about the genetic modifications, about what capabilities they're really developing, about why these 5 were targeted for elimination. Dr. Vasquez nodded. I have contacts at the University Genetics Department. If we could get these monitoring devices analyzed, maybe we could extract data on what Atlas is tracking. And I know someone who used to work security at the Atlas. Compound, Tom added. He might be willing to talk, especially if it involves animal welfare. They spent the next hour developing a plan. Dr. Vasquez would take one of the monitoring devices to her university contact for analysis. Tom would reach out to his former security contact, and Marcus would document everything, the puppy's development, all interactions with Atlas personnel, the threats and offers made. As they coordinated their efforts, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since leading his K9 unit, the focused energy of a mission with clear purpose. These puppies needed protection, but more than that, they represented something larger, a stand against the exploitation of life for profit and power. Shadow watched their planning with that unnervingly intelligent gaze. Occasionally, she would move to check on the others, particularly Scout, nudging the smallest puppy gently as if ensuring his continued improvement. Whatever they did to enhance her intelligence, Marcus observed, they succeeded. She understands far more than she should at her age. The question is, Dr. Vasquez replied soberly, what will Atlas do to get her back? As if in answer, Marcus's phone rang. An unknown number. Reynolds, he answered cautiously. Sergeant Reynolds, this is General Michael Hargrove, Department of Defense Advanced Research Projects Division. The voice was authoritative, carrying the unmistakable tone of a senior military officer. I understand you're currently in possession of experimental assets developed under classified contract DAR K94572. I'm calling to advise you that a federal seizure order will be executed within 48 hours. As a former service member, I trust you'll comply appropriately when officials arrive. Before Marcus could respond, the call ended. He looked up at the others, his expression grim. They're escalating, bringing in DoD connections. Can they do that? Dr. Vasquez asked. They can try, Marcus replied, his resolve strengthening, but they'll find I'm not so easily intimidated, not anymore. Marcus spent the afternoon fortifying the cabin, not against the winter cold, but against the threat of intrusion. He secured doors and windows, set up motion-activated floodlights around the perimeter, and positioned his truck where it could block the narrow access road if necessary. These were basic defensive measures from his military training, adapted to protect not a combat outpost, but 5 small puppies who had unexpectedly become the center of a high-stakes confrontation. The phone call from General Hargrove had confirmed what Marcus already suspected. Atlas had connections reaching into the highest levels of military authority. Invoking a Department of Defense contract added layers of complexity to their struggle, potentially placing it beyond the reach of ordinary animal welfare laws. You're preparing for a siege, Tom observed, returning from his own mission to contact his former security source. Buying time? Marcus corrected, checking the stability of a reinforced window frame. We need 48 hours to gather enough evidence to challenge whatever seizure order they produce. Tom nodded, understanding the strategy. My contact agreed to meet, but he's nervous. Says Atlas has been increasing security dramatically in the past week. Something big is happening there. Did he know anything about these puppies specifically? Only rumors. The K-series puppies were kept in a restricted section of the facility, access limited to Reinhardt and a few specialized handlers. But word got around that they were different. doing things no puppies their age should be capable of. Marcus glanced at Shadow, who was teaching Ember a rudimentary form of tug-of-war with a rope toy, an interaction that showed planning and communication well beyond normal canine development at their age. "I believe it," he said quietly. Dr. Vasquez arrived an hour later, her expression a mixture of excitement and concern. "I got preliminary feedback from my university contact," she announced, joining them at the kitchen table. She couldn't extract data from the monitoring device. It's encrypted beyond her capabilities, but she identified something extraordinary in its construction. She laid out several magnified photographs of the device's components. "This isn't just monitoring vital signs. It contains neural interface technology, microfine sensors designed to collect data on brain activity patterns. The same kind of technology used in advanced prosthetics that respond to thought commands." "They're monitoring their brain activity?" Marcus asked, studying the images. "Not just monitoring," Dr. Vasquez replied. "These components suggest a two-way interface. In theory, such a system could not only read neural patterns, but potentially influence them. The implications settled over them like a physical weight." "They're trying to control their minds," Tom said, voicing what they all realized. "Not just breed for obedience, but enforce it through technology." "Which explains why they're so desperate to get them back," Marcus added. "These puppies aren't just genetically modified, they're the subjects of experimental neural control technology. If that became public knowledge, it would trigger congressional investigations, military oversight hearings, animal rights protests, a public relations nightmare," Dr. Vasquez finished. "And perhaps more importantly," Tom suggested, "it would jeopardize whatever government contracts are funding this research." The puppies had gathered near them, sensing the intensity of the discussion. Shadow sat at attention, her eyes moving between the humans as if following the conversation. Scout, now significantly stronger, leaned against her side. Ember paced restlessly, while Willow and Ranger remained slightly apart, watching with clear interest. "We need to document this," Marcus decided. "Not just for authorities, but for the public. This kind of experimentation can't stay hidden." "I have a journalist friend at the Rocky Mountain Tribune," Dr. Vasquez offered. "She covers scientific ethics issues. If we had enough evidence, it could pressure the government to intervene." Marcus nodded. "Even with their DoD connections, Atlas couldn't withstand public scrutiny of unethical animal experimentation." "Way!" A soft whine from Shadow interrupted them. The grey-marked puppy was staring intently at the window. Seconds later, they heard the distant sound of approaching vehicles. Marcus moved quickly to the window. "Two SUVs coming up the access road. Not Atlas, these are government plates." "The seizure order," Tom said grimly. "They're moving faster than they promised." "Dr. Vasquez, take the evidence you've gathered and leave through the back," Marcus instructed, his combat leadership instincts taking over. "Tom, you should go too. No reason for both of us to face this." Both refused. "I'm the veterinarian of record," Dr. Vasquez stated firmly. "They can't legally take these puppies without addressing their medical needs first. And I'm too old to start running from fights," Tom added, a hint of steel in his voice. Marcus nodded, appreciating their solidarity. "Then let's make sure they follow every procedure by the book. Record everything, question every detail of their paperwork, buy time for whatever you can think of." They barely had time to prepare before the vehicles pulled up. 4 men in dark suits emerged, followed by Sheriff Harmon, who looked distinctly uncomfortable. Marcus met them at the door before they could knock. "Gentlemen." The lead agent, a stern-faced man with closely cropped grey hair, presented a document. "Federal seizure order for experimental assets developed under Department of Defense contract. We're authorized to take possession immediately." Marcus accepted the paper, reviewing it carefully. This order references experimental canine assets, but doesn't specify individuals. How do you confirm these are the subjects covered by your order? The agent's expression tightened. The identifying codes on their monitoring devices. ASO K14 through K18. And what provisions have been made for their medical care during transport? They're recovering from severe hypothermia and malnutrition after being abandoned in sub-zero temperatures. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. As their treating veterinarian, I'll need to see your transport protocols. These animals require specialized care and feeding every 2 hours. Any disruption could endanger their recovery. The agents exchanged glances. This clearly wasn't the simple retrieval operation they'd expected. We have qualified handlers, the lead agent stated. With neonatal veterinary experience, Dr. Vasquez challenged. These puppies are severely immunocompromised from their ordeal. I'll need to see documentation of your quarantine procedures, temperature-controlled transport equipment, and specialized formula preparation capabilities. While Dr. Vasquez engaged the agents in increasingly technical medical requirements, Marcus noticed Shadow had positioned herself and the other puppies in a tight group behind the sofa, effectively hidden from immediate view. Sheriff Harmon, who had remained silent near the door, caught Marcus's eye and subtly tilted his head toward the back of the cabin. Taking the hint, Marcus made a small gesture of acknowledgement. "Gentlemen," Marcus addressed the increasingly frustrated agents, "while my colleague discusses medical protocols, perhaps I could review the complete documentation of your seizure authority. As these animals are evidence in an ongoing animal cruelty investigation, I'll need to see your jurisdictional override authorization." The delay tactics worked for nearly an hour, Dr. Vasquez demanding increasingly specific medical assurances, Marcus questioning legal technicalities, Tom interjecting with questions about transport vehicle insulation given the mountainous terrain and weather conditions. Finally, the lead agent's patience snapped. "Enough. We're taking these animals now. Their condition will be the responsibility of Atlas security personnel waiting at the rendezvous point." "Atlas personnel?" Marcus seized on the slip. "This order presents your action as a federal seizure for DoD purposes. If you're transferring these puppies directly to Atlas, that suggests this isn't a government action, but a corporate recovery, using federal authority as cover." The agent's face reddened. "The contractual relationship between DoD and Atlas is classified. Now, where are the puppies?" Marcus moved toward the sofa, but before he could respond, Sheriff Harmon's radio crackled to life. "Sheriff, be advised we have multiple reports of protesters gathering at the Atlas Research Facility main gate. At least 30 vehicles, growing crowd. News vans on scene, over." The sheriff responded professionally, but Marcus caught the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "Copy that. Maintain position, no intervention unless public safety threatened. I'll report when available. Out." The lead agent pulled out his phone, stepping away for a private conversation. His expression darkened as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "There's been a change of plans," he announced, returning to the group. "The retrieval operation is temporarily suspended." "Problem?" Marcus asked innocently. "Operational considerations," the agent replied stiffly. "We'll be in contact regarding rescheduling." After they departed, Sheriff Harmon lingered behind. "Thought you could use a diversion," he said once they were alone. "My daughter's veterinary science club organized a spontaneous animal welfare. Protest at Atlas. Social media did the rest." "You helped us," Marcus observed, surprised. Harmon shrugged. "I enforce the law, Reynolds. Something doesn't smell right about how Atlas operates. Always putting pressure on my office to ignore certain violations, expedite certain permits. I don't like it." He nodded toward where the puppies were cautiously emerging from their hiding place. Besides, my daughter would never forgive me if I helped take those puppies. She's among the protesters." After the sheriff left, Tom burst into rare laughter. A teenage organized protest just defeated federal agents. There's hope for this world yet. "It's just a delay," Marcus cautioned. "They'll be back, and next time they'll be better prepared for our objections." "But we've bought precious time," Dr. Vasquez replied. "And more importantly, public attention is now focused on Atlas. My journalist contact is already at the protest gathering statements." The unexpected victory, however temporary, energized them. While the puppies rested, the three humans developed a more comprehensive strategy. Dr. Vasquez would compile a complete medical dossier documenting the puppies' condition when found and their ongoing recovery needs. Tom would leverage his community connections to gather testimonials from others who had witnessed questionable Atlas practices. Marcus would prepare a detailed account of every interaction with Atlas personnel, highlighting discrepancies in their claims. "What about the neural control technology?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "That's our most damning evidence, but also the hardest to prove without specialized equipment." Marcus considered this, absently scratching behind Shadow's ears as the puppy leaned against his leg. "We need an expert who can analyze these devices properly. Someone with access to advanced technology who isn't afraid of Atlas." "I might know someone," Tom said after a moment's thought. "Dr. Naomi Chen at Colorado Tech. She's a neural engineering specialist who's been outspoken about ethical boundaries in her field. She also has security clearance from previous DoD work, so she can't easily be intimidated by claims of national security." "Can you reach her?" Marcus asked. "I'll try. She's my niece's former professor." As evening approached, they took a moment to appreciate what they'd accomplished. The puppies, oblivious to the legal and ethical battle surrounding them, had settled into play. Even Scout, whose improvement continued to exceed expectations. He could now keep up with the others for short periods, though he still tired more quickly. Shadow, as always, maintained her watchful oversight of the group. Marcus had noticed she consistently moderated her play with Scout, adjusting her strength and speed to accommodate his limitations, a level of empathy unusual in a puppy. "So young. They're bonding as a pack," Tom observed. "That's significant for their development." "And potentially problematic for Atlas's plans," Dr. Vasquez added. "From what we understand, they want working dogs that bond primarily with human handlers, not with each other. Strong pack bonds might interfere with their objectives." Marcus watched as Shadow organized what appeared to be a rudimentary game of hide-and-seek with a toy, communicating through subtle body language that the others seemed to understand perfectly. "I don't think they anticipated this level of social intelligence," he said. "They created dogs with enhanced cognitive capabilities, but didn't consider all the implications. Shadow isn't just smart, she's using her intelligence to strengthen the group." A sudden thought struck him. That's it. That's why they were abandoned. They weren't culls because they failed to develop as expected. They were eliminated because they succeeded too well, just in an unexpected direction. "What do you mean?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "Look at them," Marcus gestured to the puppies. "Atlas wanted enhanced military working dogs, obedient, capable, but ultimately tools to be controlled. What they've created instead are dogs with independent intelligence who form strong social bonds. Dogs that might question commands if they disagreed with them. Dogs that might prioritize protecting each other over following orders." Tom nodded slowly. In the old stories, the most dangerous wolf to the hunter wasn't the strongest, but the smartest. The one that could lead the pack away from danger, that could outwit the traps. "Exactly," Marcus agreed. "Atlas hasn't just enhanced their intelligence, they've enhanced their capacity for independence. Shadow doesn't just understand more, she makes decisions based on that understanding." As if confirming his assessment, Shadow approached, carrying the toy she'd been using in their game. She placed it deliberately at Marcus's feet, then looked up at him expectantly, not with the simple play solicitation of a normal puppy, but with what seemed like an invitation to join their social activity. "She's integrating you into the pack," Tom observed quietly. Marcus accepted the toy, momentarily overwhelmed by the trust this represented. For a creature who had been abandoned by humans, this willingness to incorporate a human into her social structure showed extraordinary adaptability and forgiveness. "We can't let Atlas get them back," he said with quiet determination, "whatever it takes." Dr. Vasquez's phone chimed with a notification. She checked it, then looked up with renewed hope. "The protest has grown to over 100 people. My journalist contact says 2 national news networks have picked up the story. Social media is exploding with no Atlas abuse and #save the K95 hashtags." "The K95?" Marcus asked. She smiled. "Apparently that's what the protesters are calling them. Your puppies have become a cause." "Not just my puppies," Marcus corrected. "They belong to themselves, that's the whole point." As night fell, bringing with it a gentle snowfall that blanketed the landscape in fresh white, Marcus stood at the window, watching the dancing flakes catch the security lights. Behind him, 5 extraordinary puppies slept peacefully, unaware of the movement. They had inspired or the battle still to come. For the first time since returning from war, Marcus felt not just purpose, but connection to these unique animals, to Tom and Dr. Vasquez, and to the growing community rallying to their cause. The isolation that had defined his post-military life was dissolving, replaced by something he had almost forgotten: hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would face them together. The alliance was growing stronger by the hour, united by a simple but powerful principle: all life deserves dignity and protection, especially those created for others' purposes. Shadow stirred briefly in her sleep, making a soft sound that might have been contentment. Marcus smiled, realizing that in trying to save these puppies, he was finally finding his own path to healing. Morning brought fresh challenges and unexpected allies. Dr. Naomi Chen from Colorado Tech arrived shortly after dawn, her electric vehicle gliding silently up the snow-covered drive. She moved with the precise efficiency of someone accustomed to working with sensitive technology, her dark hair streaked with premature gray, despite being only in her early 40s. "Tom explained the situation," she said after brief introductions, setting a specialized equipment case on the kitchen table. "I've been monitoring Atlas's research publications for years. They've been deliberately vague about their Canine Cognitive Enhancements program, which always suggested they were crossing ethical boundaries." Marcus helped her set up her equipment, a portable neural scanning system and specialized interface devices designed to analyze bioelectronic components without disrupting their function. "The challenge," Dr. Chen explained while calibrating her instruments, "will be documenting the capabilities of these devices without alerting Atlas that we're examining them. From what Tom described, these monitoring tags likely have remote data transmission functions." "Can they track the puppy's location?" Marcus asked, concerned. "Almost certainly, but it's possible the abandonment scenario deactivated or damaged that function." She studied the scanner readouts with increasing interest. "Otherwise, I suspect Atlas would have come directly here rather than seeking legal avenues to retrieve them." Dr. Vasquez joined them, having returned from an early morning meeting with her journalist contact. She watched with professional curiosity as Dr. Chen gently positioned scanning equipment near Shadow, who remained remarkably still, as if understanding the importance of the procedure. "Will removing these devices harm them?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "I wouldn't attempt removal yet," Dr. Chen cautioned. "The neural interfaces appear to have integrated with their developing nervous systems. Improper removal could cause neurological damage." She adjusted a setting on her equipment. I need to understand exactly how these interfaces are functioning. First, the morning progressed with methodical scientific investigation. One by one, Dr. Chen scanned each puppy's monitoring device, compiling data while explaining her findings to Marcus and the others. These are far more sophisticated than anything publicly acknowledged in neural interface research, she noted with professional admiration despite her ethical concerns. The microfine extensions reach into the limbic system and prefrontal development, regions, areas associated with emotional responses and decision-making. Could they directly control behavior? Marcus asked, watching as Shadow observed the proceedings with evident interest. Not like a remote control, Dr. Chen clarified. But they could potentially influence emotional states, stress responses, even attention focus. Imagine being able to artificially induce calmness during high-stress situations or direct attention toward specific stimuli. For military applications, that would be extraordinarily valuable. And profoundly unethical, Dr. Vasquez added. These puppies can't consent to such manipulation. Dr. Chen nodded agreement while continuing her scans. What's particularly interesting is that subject K-17, Shadow you've called her, shows signs of adaptation. Her neural architecture appears to be integrating the interface differently than the others. What does that mean? Marcus asked. I'd need more comprehensive equipment to be certain, but preliminary data suggests her brain may be incorporating the neural interface as an enhancement rather than being limited by it, almost as if she's learning to use the technology rather than being used by it. The implications stunned everyone into momentary silence. Shadow, seeming to sense she was the subject of discussion, approached Dr. Chen and sat directly before her, making deliberate eye contact. Remarkable awareness, Dr. Chen murmured. I've worked with many research animals, and I've never seen this level of cognitive presence, especially in one so young. Their scientific discussion was interrupted by Tom's return. The elderly rancher entered with urgency, stomping snow from his boots. Atlas is making their move, he announced without preamble. Kane Blackwell held an emergency press conference this morning. He's positioning Atlas as a patriotic company developing life-saving technology for military working dogs. Claims these puppies were stolen from their facility during experimental medical treatment. Dr. Vasquez switched on her tablet, quickly finding the press conference video. They gathered around to watch Kane Blackwell, impeccably dressed and projecting calm authority, addressing a room of reporters. These puppies represent a breakthrough in canine healthcare, Blackwell stated smoothly. Our enhanced cognitive development program has created neural interfaces that could revolutionize how we treat canine brain injuries and cognitive disorders. The monitoring devices they wear are providing critical medical data. Removing them from our specialized care environment puts their development at risk. He's completely inverting the truth, Marcus said, anger building as he watched. It's a brilliant counter-strategy, Dr. Chen observed clinically. He's reframing the entire narrative, painting Atlas as medical innovators and positioning you as the threat to these puppies' welfare. The press conference continued with Blackwell introducing a team of white-coated veterinarians and researchers who shared carefully structured information about revolutionary canine neural health advancements. No mention was made of military applications, genetic modifications, or behavioral control technology. The individuals currently holding these puppies, while perhaps well-meaning, lack the specialized knowledge and equipment to support their unique needs, Blackwell concluded. We implore authorities to expedite their return to our care before irreversible developmental damage occurs. Marcus switched off the video, his jaw tight with frustration. They're painting me as some kind of animal hoarder interfering with medical treatment. It gets worse, Tom added grimly. They've filed for an emergency hearing this afternoon with Judge Weston, requesting immediate custody based on specialized medical necessity. Weston is known to favor corporate interests. The group fell silent, absorbing this development. The legal and public relations landscape had shifted dramatically beneath them, potentially undermining all their careful preparation. It was Dr. Chen who broke the silence, her scientific detachment giving way to quiet determination. Then we need to change the narrative again, with irrefutable evidence of what these devices actually do. She turned to her equipment, making rapid adjustments. I can accelerate my analysis, focus specifically on documenting the behavioral modification components. With proper evidence, we can prove these aren't medical monitoring devices, but experimental control technology. Will that be enough? Dr. Vasquez asked. Atlas has virtually unlimited resources and government connections. But they have vulnerabilities, Marcus noted, tactical thinking coming to the fore. Corporate entities fear three things: public relations disasters, shareholder panic, and regulatory scrutiny. We need to trigger all three simultaneously. As they developed their counter-strategy, Marcus noticed Shadow watching their discussion with unusual intensity. The puppy moved deliberately between each person as they spoke, as if following the conversation. When Marcus mentioned regulatory scrutiny, Shadow tilted her head slightly, then moved to the cabin door, scratching lightly. "What is it, girl?" Marcus asked, momentarily distracted from their planning. Shadow repeated the scratching, more insistently this time. Marcus opened the door, expecting the puppy needed a bathroom break, but instead Shadow sat on the threshold, looking expectantly at the driveway. Seconds later, they heard the distant sound of approaching vehicles. How did she know? Dr. Vasquez whispered. They had no time to ponder this remarkable awareness. 3 vehicles appeared. A county animal control van flanked by 2 sheriff's department cruisers. Sheriff Harmon emerged from the lead vehicle, his expression grave. "Reynolds," he called, approaching the cabin. "I've got an emergency custody. Order for the puppies, signed by Judge Weston 30 minutes ago. Cites specialized medical necessity and imminent danger." "That's impossible," Dr. Vasquez protested. "The hearing wasn't scheduled until this afternoon." "No hearing," Harmon replied grimly. "Ex parte emergency order based on affidavits from 3 veterinary specialists claiming the monitoring devices require immediate professional attention." Marcus felt cold determination replacing his initial shock. "Those specialists work for Atlas." "Almost certainly," Harmon agreed, surprising them with his candor. "But the order is legally valid. I'm required to execute it." 2. Animal control. Officers approached with transport crates. Behind them, Marcus could see Alexis Crawford watching from one of the sheriff's vehicles, a satisfied expression on her face. "Sheriff," Dr. Chen stepped forward, presenting her credentials. "I'm Dr. Naomi Chen, neuroscience researcher from Colorado Tech. I've been conducting a scientific assessment of these monitoring devices. My preliminary findings indicate they are not medical monitoring equipment, but experimental neural control technology. Removing these puppies could interfere with a potential federal investigation into unethical animal experimentation." Harmon hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Do you have documentation of these findings?" "Preliminary data only," Dr. Chen admitted. "I need approximately 4 more hours to complete my analysis and prepare formal documentation." The sheriff checked his watch, then lowered his voice. "The court order specifies immediate execution. However, proper animal welfare protocols for transport preparation could reasonably take several hours, especially given the puppy's medical history." It was a small opening, but one they could work with. Marcus nodded slightly, understanding. The sheriff's unspoken assistance. "We'll need to prepare appropriate food, medication, and bedding materials," Marcus said, matching the sheriff's professional tone. Dr. Vasquez, as their treating veterinarian, should document their current condition before transport, all according to standard protocols. For the next hour, they engaged in a carefully choreographed delay, Dr. Vasquez conducting thorough examinations of each puppy, documenting vital signs and concerns. Marcus meticulously preparing specialized formula and medication doses. Tom discussing appropriate bedding requirements with the increasingly impatient animal control officers. Meanwhile, Dr. Chen worked feverishly at the kitchen table, her equipment, processing data at maximum capacity. Shadow remained unusually close to her, as if understanding the importance of her work. Crawford eventually emerged from the vehicle, her frustration evident. "This is unnecessary obstruction, Sheriff. These animals need immediate specialized care. We're following proper protocols for animals with documented medical concerns," Harmon replied evenly. "I won't risk further harm through improper transport. Procedures." As tensions mounted, Marcus noticed Shadow suddenly alert, ears pricked toward the access road. Moments later, they all heard the distinctive sound of approaching news helicopters. Dr. Vasquez checked her phone, breaking into a restrained smile. "My journalist contact came through. 3 major networks are covering this live. They're framing it as Military Veteran Fights Corporation for Abandoned Puppies' Rights." Crawford's phone rang. Her expression darkened as she listened to whoever was calling. "Understood," she said tersely before approaching the sheriff. "We need to postpone this transfer temporarily. Operational considerations have arisen." "The court order," Harmon began, "will be amended with updated transport protocols," Crawford finished sharply. "We'll return with appropriate specialized equipment." As the Atlas representative and animal control officers departed, Sheriff Harmon lingered behind. "You've bought some time," he said quietly, "but Judge Weston won't withdraw that order. Atlas has too much influence. Whatever you're planning, do it quickly." After he left, the group gathered in the kitchen, energy renewed by this temporary reprieve. The media attention forced them to retreat, Dr. Vasquez observed. Public sentiment is clearly against taking puppies from their rescuer. "But sentiment isn't enough against legal orders," Marcus cautioned. "We need concrete evidence." Dr. Chen looked up from her equipment, excitement breaking through her professional reserve. "I believe I've found it. These devices contain programming for something called behavioral compliance protocols. The code is sophisticated, but the purpose is unmistakable. Neural pathways associated with independent decision-making can be selectively inhibited." "Mind control," Tom translated grimly. "Not precisely," Dr. Chen clarified. "More like selective emotional regulation that makes resistance to commands deeply uncomfortable. These puppies would physically experience distress if they attempted to disobey particular directive patterns." Marcus knelt beside Shadow, gently examining the device on her neck with new understanding of its insidious purpose. "This is why you were abandoned," he said softly. "You found a way to resist it, didn't you?" Shadow met his gaze with an awareness that seemed to confirm his suspicion. "Is there enough evidence to take to federal authorities?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "Yes," Dr. Chen confirmed. "This clearly violates multiple regulations regarding experimental animal welfare, not to mention ethical guidelines for neural interface research. The question is whether we can reach the right authorities before Atlas regains control." Marcus stood, decision made. "Then we need to act now. Dr. Chen, prepare your evidence in the most comprehensive format possible. Dr. Vasquez, contact your journalist friend. Tell her we're ready to provide scientific documentation of what these devices really do. Tom, reach out to every community connection you have. We need public witnesses to whatever happens next." "Oh, what are you planning?" Tom asked. "A direct approach," Marcus replied, military strategy evident in his thinking. "Atlas has been controlling the battlefield by keeping us reactive. It's time we seized the initiative. He turned to Shadow, who watched him with that uncanny intelligence. You've been fighting this battle longer than any of us, haven't you? First against their programming, then for survival in the snow, now for your freedom. The grey-marked puppy held his gaze steadily, and in that moment, Marcus felt a connection that transcended the normal human-animal bond. These weren't just puppies he had rescued. They were sentient beings with an intrinsic right to self-determination. Whatever happens, he promised quietly, I won't let them turn you into weapons. You deserve the chance to become whatever you're meant to be. As they mobilized their resources and finalized their strategy, a new energy filled the cabin, the focused determination of those fighting not just for themselves, but for a principle larger than any individual. These 5 puppies, abandoned because they maintained their essential nature despite technological and genetic manipulation, had become symbols of resistance against the commodification of life itself. The coming confrontation would determine not just their fate, but potentially the boundaries of ethical responsibility toward all sentient beings enhanced by human technology. In preparing to protect Shadow and her siblings, Marcus had found something he thought he'd lost forever in the battlefields of Afghanistan. A cause worth fighting for, and the conviction that individual action could still make a meaningful difference against seemingly insurmountable power. By mid-afternoon, Marcus's cabin had transformed into an operations center. Dr. Chen continued analyzing the neural interface devices, documenting every aspect of their function with scientific precision. Dr. Vasquez coordinated with media contacts, ensuring their evidence would reach the public regardless of what happened next. Tom worked his extensive community connections, mobilizing local ranchers and residents who had their own reasons to distrust Atlas Security's growing influence in the region. Marcus focused on strategy, drawing on his military training to anticipate Atlas's likely responses. The puppies seemed to sense the heightened activity, remaining unusually calm and attentive. Shadow particularly stayed close to Marcus, observing his preparations with that disconcerting intelligence. Atlas will return with reinforcements, Marcus told the group during a brief strategy session. Probably federal agents again. Possibly. With military authority this time. We need to be ready to present our evidence immediately, before they can control the narrative. The neural interface documentation is nearly complete, Dr. Chen reported. I've confirmed that these devices contain behavioral modification capabilities that grossly violate research ethics protocols. No legitimate medical purpose could justify this level of neural intervention in developing canine brains. I've arranged for simultaneous release of our findings to 3 major news outlets and 2 congressional oversight committees, Dr. Vasquez added. The moment we give the signal, everything goes public. Marcus nodded approval. Good. Now we need to address the most vulnerable aspect of our position, the monitoring devices themselves. I've been considering that, Dr. Chen said. While I initially recommended against removing them due to potential neurological risks, my analysis suggests Shadow has already developed neural pathways that effectively bypass the interface's control functions. Her brain has essentially reconfigured itself to integrate the technology without being limited by it. Could the same be done for the others? Marcus asked. Possibly, with Shadow's help, Dr. Chen replied, excitement breaking. Through her professional reserve, I've documented unusual neural synchronization patterns when she interacts closely with the other puppies, particularly Scout. It appears she's somehow teaching them to adapt as she has. Tom, who had been watching the puppies during this discussion, pointed toward the living room area. Look at them now! Shadow had gathered the other 4 puppies in a tight circle. They were engaged in what appeared to be direct nose-to-nose contact, remaining absolutely still except for occasional synchronized movements. To casual observation, it might have looked like simple puppy play, but the intensity and purposefulness of their positioning suggested something far more significant. "They're communicating," Dr. Chen whispered, adjusting her equipment to capture the interaction. "The neural interfaces may have inadvertently created pathways for direct neural communication between them. Shadow appears to be using that capability to share her adaptation strategies." They watched in fascination as this mysterious exchange continued for several minutes. When the puppies finally separated, even Scout, the smallest and weakest, moved with new confidence and awareness. "Whatever just happened," Marcus observed, "they're more connected now than before." Their observation was interrupted by Tom's return from checking the perimeter. "We've got company coming. Lot of company." Through the cabin windows, they could see a procession of vehicles approaching, not just Atlas Security SUVs, but Sheriff's Department cruisers, what appeared to be federal agency vehicles, and behind them, a growing line of civilian trucks and cars. "Word has spread," Tom explained. "Those last vehicles are local supporters. Looks like half the county is turning out." The lead vehicles pulled up to the cabin, and a now familiar contingent emerged. Kane Blackwell himself, flanked by Alexis Crawford and Dr. Reinhardt. Behind them came Sheriff Harmon, looking deeply uncomfortable, accompanied by 2 federal agents. But the most disturbing presence was a team of individuals in specialized tactical gear, bearing the logo of Atlas Security's extraction unit. "They're bringing out the heavy response team," Marcus noted grimly. "This isn't a legal proceeding anymore, it's a recovery operation." As the Atlas contingent approached the cabin, something unexpected happened. The civilian vehicles that had followed began discharging their passengers. Dozens of local residents, many carrying hastily made signs with slogans like "Protect the K-95" and "Stop Atlas Experimentation." They formed a loose perimeter around the property, creating an impromptu barrier between the officials and the cabin. Even more surprising, 3 news vans pulled in behind them, camera crews quickly deploying equipment. Dr. Vasquez's media strategy had succeeded beyond expectation. Kane Blackwell's expression darkened as he surveyed this unexpected development. He conferred briefly with Crawford before approaching the cabin, making a visible effort to maintain his composed public persona. Marcus met them at the door, flanked by Dr. Chen and Dr. Vasquez. Shadow positioned herself at Marcus's side, her posture alert but calm. "Mr. Reynolds," Blackwell began with forced cordiality, "this situation has escalated unnecessarily. I'm here personally to resolve it with minimal disruption." "There's nothing to resolve," Marcus replied evenly. "These puppies were abandoned to die. I found them, saved them, and have been caring for them under professional veterinary supervision. Your company's claim that they require your specialized care is demonstrably false." Blackwell's smile tightened. "We have a valid court order based on their unique medical needs. The monitoring devices they wear require specialized attention only our facilities can provide." "You mean these devices?" Dr. Chen stepped forward, holding up her tablet displaying detailed technical schematics. "I've completed a comprehensive analysis of their structure and function. They're not medical monitoring devices. They're experimental neural control interfaces designed to modify behavior through direct brain stimulation. In other words, mind control technology being tested on puppies." Blackwell's facade cracked slightly. "Dr. Chen, your presence here is unexpected. Those are proprietary systems protected under national security provisions. Your unauthorized analysis could constitute a federal offense." "I have appropriate security clearance," Dr. Chen replied calmly, "and ethical concerns regarding animal experimentation override proprietary protections when welfare violations are evident." Reinhardt moved forward, addressing Dr. Chen directly. Your preliminary analysis misinterprets the technology's purpose. These are therapeutic neural interfaces designed to correct genetic predispositions toward aggression and instability. No, they're not, Dr. Chen countered firmly. I've isolated the behavioral compliance protocols embedded in their programming. They're explicitly designed to override natural decision-making processes and create artificial obedience patterns. There is no therapeutic justification for such functions. The exchange had drawn the attention of the gathering crowd and news cameras. Sensing the shifting dynamics, Sheriff Harmon approached. Mr. Blackwell, I understand you have a court order, but given the public nature of this dispute and the new evidence being presented, I believe we should pause any enforcement action until a proper hearing can be conducted. That's not acceptable, Crawford interjected sharply. Those animals represent millions in research investment and critical defense technology. We can't allow unqualified civilians to interfere with national security assets. Her choice of words couldn't have been worse. One of the news crews had moved close enough to capture her statement, and a murmur rippled through the watching crowd. Animals or assets? Someone called out. Which are they? Marcus seized the opening. That's the central question here. Atlas claims these puppies are medical patients needing specialized care, but their own director just called them assets and defense technology. They can't have it both ways. He turned toward the news cameras, strategic instincts guiding him to shift the battlefield to public opinion. These puppies were genetically modified without ethical oversight and implanted with experimental neural control devices. When they showed too much independence, too much natural dog behavior, they were abandoned in freezing temperatures to die. Shadow, seemingly understanding the gravity of the moment, stood tall beside Marcus, her intelligent gaze moving between the Atlas executives and the watching crowd. Look at them, Marcus continued. Does anyone believe these puppies are better, offers laboratory subjects than living as the remarkable animals they are? The crowd's energy was palpable now, clearly favoring Marcus and the puppies. Blackwell, a shrewd tactician himself, recognized the shifting public relations disaster unfolding. He gestured for Crawford and the extraction team to stand down temporarily. Mr. Reynolds, he said, lowering his voice, perhaps we can discuss this more productively in private. I'm authorized to offer you a consulting position with Atlas. Full benefits, substantial compensation, and continued involvement with these animals' development. Your military experience makes you uniquely qualified to help guide our program in more ethical directions. It was a calculated offer designed to appeal to both Marcus's financial needs and his attachment to the puppies. For a brief moment, doubt flickered across his mind, not about Atlas's intentions, but about his own ability to protect the puppies against such powerful opposition in the long term. As if sensing this moment of uncertainty, Shadow pressed against his leg, looking up with unwavering trust. Behind her, the other 4 puppies had emerged from the cabin, forming a perfect line: Ember, Willow, Ranger, and Scout. Their collective presence a silent testament to what was truly at stake. Not interested, Marcus stated firmly. These puppies deserve to develop naturally, without being treated as experimental subjects or military assets. Blackwell's expression hardened. Then you leave us no choice but to execute the court order. Sheriff, please proceed with the seizure. Sheriff Harmon hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with enforcing the order under these circumstances, and with so many witnesses. Mr. Blackwell, given the substantial questions raised about the nature of these devices and the puppy's welfare, I believe prudence dictates— Your belief is irrelevant, Sheriff, Crawford interrupted. You have a valid court order. Execute it or be held in contempt. The confrontation had reached its critical point. Marcus prepared to make his final stand, uncertain how he could physically prevent the seizure, but determined to try. The extraction Team began moving forward, specialized animal control equipment at the ready. Then something extraordinary happened. Shadow stepped forward, positioning herself between Marcus and the approaching team. The other 4 puppies lined up beside her, creating a small but unified front. Despite their young age and small size, there was something undeniably powerful in their collective stance, an intelligence and determination that transcended normal canine behavior. The lead extraction specialist faltered, clearly unsettled by the puppy's unusual behavior. "Sir," he addressed Reinhardt, "these subjects are displaying coordinated defensive positioning. That's not in the behavioral profile for their developmental stage." Dr. Reinhardt's scientific curiosity momentarily overrode his professional detachment. Fascinating. They appear to be demonstrating pack protection behaviors that shouldn't be possible at their age. The neural network must have accelerated certain cognitive pathways. Or perhaps, Dr. Chen suggested loudly enough for nearby cameras to capture, your experiments created enhanced intelligence that has developed in ways you didn't anticipate. Intelligence that includes moral agency and self-determination. The standoff continued for several tense moments, neither side willing to back down. Then Scout, the smallest puppy who had hovered nearest death when Marcus found them, did something entirely unexpected. He broke from the line, approaching Sheriff Harmon directly. The tiny black-marked puppy sat at the sheriff's feet, looking up with an expression that somehow conveyed both vulnerability and dignity. In that moment, the abstract, legal, and ethical arguments crystallized into something profoundly simple. A puppy who had been treated as an experimental subject, abandoned to die, was now asking for protection from those who would return him to that fate. Sheriff Harmon knelt slowly, meeting Scout's gaze. After a long moment, he stood and faced Blackwell. "I can't in good conscience enforce this order today," he stated firmly. "These animals show clear signs of trauma associated with their previous treatment. As the ranking law enforcement officer present, I'm exercising my authority to delay execution of this order pending an emergency hearing with full evidence presentation." "This is outrageous," Crawford sputtered. "You have no authority to overrule a judge's order." "I have both the authority and obligation to prevent potential animal cruelty," Harmon replied evenly, "which is what immediate seizure might constitute given the evidence presented today. Judge Weston will receive my full report, including the scientific analysis of these devices and documentation of the puppy's condition when found." Blackwell recognized defeat in this round, his calculating mind already shifting to damage control. "This minor delay changes nothing," he told Marcus quietly. "Atlas has resources you cannot imagine. These animals represent technology too valuable to abandon." "They're not technology," Marcus replied. "That's something you still don't understand." As the Atlas contingent reluctantly withdrew, followed by the federal agents, the gathered crowd broke into spontaneous applause. The news cameras captured everything. The puppies still standing in their remarkable formation, Marcus and his allies beside them, and the retreating figures of Atlas executives. Once they were safely gone, Marcus knelt beside Shadow, overwhelmed by what had just transpired. The grey-marked puppy met his gaze with what could only be described as satisfaction. "You knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you?" he murmured. "All of you." Dr. Chen approached, her scientific composure giving way to wonder. "What we just witnessed goes beyond enhanced intelligence. They demonstrated coordinated strategy, emotional intelligence, and intentional communication with humans beyond their handling experience. This represents cognitive capabilities we've never documented in canines of any age." "They're extraordinary," Dr. Vasquez agreed, "but that makes them even more vulnerable. Atlas won't give up. They'll just change tactics." Marcus nodded, the victory feeling temporary but significant. Then we need to change tactics too. Defense isn't enough anymore. It's time to take this fight directly to Atlas, on our terms. As the afternoon faded into evening, the impromptu gathering evolved into something resembling both celebration and war council. Local supporters remained, offering assistance and sharing their own stories of Atlas's troubling influence in the region. Dr. Chen continued documenting the puppies' remarkable behaviors, building an irrefutable scientific case for their unique cognitive status. Media reports were already spreading nationally, framing the conflict as a David versus Goliath battle over the ethical boundaries of animal experimentation. Through it all, the puppies remained at the center, not as passive subjects of human concern, but as active participants in determining their own fate. They moved among the gathered supporters with purpose, each interaction seeming deliberate, rather than random. As Marcus watched Shadow orchestrating these connections, he realized something profound had shifted. He hadn't just saved these puppies from death. He had become part of their journey towards something unprecedented. Canine intelligence enhanced not just by human technology, but by their own adaptation and determination. The real battle was just beginning. But for the first time, Marcus felt absolute certainty in its purpose. These 5 abandoned puppies deserved the chance to become whatever their remarkable minds might allow. Not weapons, not assets, but beings charting their own unique evolutionary path. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories, right? On your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.